Greetings from yesterday. Today I wanted to come clean with you. You see, I have this guilty pleasure which I don't really tell that many people about. Now, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts recently, and that isn't the guilty pleasure, but I've been listening to a lot of podcasts by BBC Sounds, sort of documentary series, and I just love the way they're put together, which I guess is kind of a guilty pleasure because when you think about it, they're really just Radio 4 shows put onto podcasts, and now I'm a Radio 4 listener, it appears. Nothing wrong with that, it's just that I've only just realised this about myself. But the reason that these podcasts are relevant is because the one that got me into listening to these BBC Sounds podcasts was one called Uncanny. The guy who presents Uncanny is a guy called Danny Robbins, and he is an excellent presenter and journalist. I really love his style of storytelling, but the stories that he's telling, the thing he's investigating, is ghost stories. Once Uncanny was finished, I started looking for more, which is when I realised that they had a whole series dedicated to a particular haunting called the Battersea Poltergeist, and one recently that came out called The Witch Farm, and I love listening to these stories. I am obsessed with these ghost stories. And that's when it struck me that I think I've always been a little bit obsessed with ghost stories. When I was younger, my mum used to watch this programme called Most Haunted, which I'm sure most of you will remember. Scenes of Derek Akara being possessed by demons and speaking in silly voices.
Take thy hand off me, wench.
No, you don't scare me.
For the most part, I thought these shows were just silly, but I still loved watching them. There's something about the paranormal and the unexplainable which just captures my imagination, and I don't think I'm the only one. I then realised that when I was younger, one of my favourite movies was Casper the Friendly Ghost. I even had Casper pyjamas, which had Casper on it, and his outline was glow in the dark, so when you turned the lights off, you could see the outline of Casper on my pyjamas. That's how much I loved that film. And it was only when I reflected on all of this that I realised I'm a little bit obsessed with ghosts. I don't know, I can't see if I'm actually in the shot here. Now, when it comes to ghost stories or paranormal activity, there's two teams. There is Team Believer and there is Team Skeptic. And I would firmly put myself in Team Skeptic. I certainly used to put myself firmly in Team Skeptic because I was always of the opinion that there was reasonable explanations for everything that was being shown to me. I'm one of those people that really needs to see something to believe it. Otherwise, I'm going to trust the science. I have desperately wanted to experience some sort of ghost experience or haunting experience my whole life to change my mind. I don't believe in ghosts, but I want to see something that makes me believe in ghosts. And then I remembered something from when I was growing up, something I haven't told that many people, but I have had an experience with a ghost. So let me set the scene. I'm somewhere between the ages of 14 and 16, and my main source of income at that point in time was my paper round, but it wasn't quite enough for all the PlayStation games I wanted to buy, so I had a secondary income at the time, which was babysitting. Don't want to brag, but I did have a Red Cross babysitting certificate, so I could do it to the standards the Red Cross wanted me to. One of the people I used to babysit for was the local vicar, so as you can imagine, he lived in the vicarage. Now, the vicar was actually a family friend. We knew him pretty well and we'd been around his house loads of times, so I was very familiar with the building, but it was a little bit different when you were going there by yourself at night. You see, the vicarage is behind the church, and the quickest way to get to the vicarage is through the graveyard. I think you understand that graveyards are freaky places. There are dead people buried in the ground. Like, literally next to you is a skeleton just a bit below the ground. They're freaky. So my senses are already primed. I already think of this place as a terrifying place as I go in. And as I'm going to the vicarage, I feel really uneasy. I feel like there's something in there and I can't quite explain it. But I do make it through the graveyard and I get to the vicar's house and I do my job babysitting his two boys. And I quickly forget the uneasy feeling I had when I go through the graveyard. The vicarage and his wife eventually come home and I am relieved of my babysitting duties. It's time to walk home and I'm faced with the prospect of walking through the graveyard again. I quickly remember the uneasy feeling from when I was arrived and I was confronted with a choice. I could go the long way round the graveyard, which means I didn't have to go through the graveyard at all, or I could go the quick way home through the graveyard. It was late, I wanted to get home quickly, and to be honest with you, I was thinking to myself, hang on, I'm a 14 to 16-year-old lad. I can't be scared of walking through a graveyard, especially when I don't believe in ghosts. So filled with anxiety and dread that I knew was completely irrational, I headed through the graveyard. Now my senses are on high alert as I walk through the graveyard. I'm looking around, trying to see if I can see anything, listening out for sounds. I know that there's nothing there, but I just want to be sure. Eventually, as I'm walking through the graveyard, I notice that there's something moving along my right-hand side, along the gravestones, and this freaks me out. I panic and I stop. I am frozen to the spot, terrified, and I'm looking around trying to see what was moving across the graves. Maybe it was a fox or something, maybe it was a bird, maybe there was a cat in there, trying to figure out what had made that movement, but I couldn't see anything. Whatever had moved had stopped moving. So I set off again. I start to move a little quicker because I am now terrified. I need to get home as quickly as I can, and more importantly, I need to get the hell out of this graveyard. The panic then well and truly sets in because I start to notice that I can see this thing moving across the gravestones again. What on earth is going on? What do I do? Do I run? No, I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna confront this thing because this is silly. I don't believe in ghosts. What on earth could this thing possibly be? I'm gonna confront it. So I stop. I wait. And I listen. And I can't hear or see a thing. It is deathly still, and I am none the wiser as to what on earth was just going on. I pause and I take a deep breath. And I tell myself that whatever I've just seen must have been in my mind because there's nothing there. Right, we've got to be calm now. Our imagination is running wild with us, John. Let's just calmly walk through this graveyard and get ourselves home. I prepare myself to go again. I take a step. And then it happens. This thing moves again, but this time it's different. This time I can clearly make out what I'm looking at, which I couldn't before. And I'll be completely honest with you, I was stunned. It was my shadow. The thing I was terrified of, the thing I was running away from in the graveyard, the thing that stopped whenever I stopped and started whenever I started was my shadow. My own bloody shadow. So no, I still haven't seen a ghost, which means I'm still firmly team skeptic, but my God, do I love a good ghost story. There's still a big part of me that really wants to see a ghost. As much as I don't believe that's possible, I want to see something that makes the irrational possible. But until then, unfortunately, I do think that most of these things have an explanation. Like me, the young boy who was in a graveyard terrified and got scared of his own shadow. I think that's all I've got for today, so I'll see you tomorrow. And until then, remember, don't be a dick and don't have nightmares.